Heavy lies of crime, lies of crime, lies of crime. In the quest to build a kingdom, certain sacrifices must be made. Feel me? Feel me? Peace to verse, peace to verse, peace to verse. Shit sound like a grand entrance. It's only right that I represent as such.
The hip-hop writer is a creator, composing understanding words of cultured brilliance, powering a rebalance of the elements equally. Pages of rejuvenated reaffirmation, simply the almighty leadership of insightful craft work that stands to build through any confrontation born to be. Yet his daily duty is as a journalist that questions properly, uses his ears for the good to filter the real. And as the art decays by dilution, he concentrates the best again and again, exposing it in the print. Today's journalist and tomorrow's historian, he listens to share. Here is that necessary attempt executed again and again and again. This is Sunez, your host of the PowerWrite Podcast here on PremierHipHop.com. Who are we? Who am I? And what is this element that we're talking about? My name is Sunez Allah. I'm a conductor, I'm a writer of an entire element. This element of hip-hop that is actually engaged and embedded with every other element. Every other element of its choosing, because I'm a hip-hop writer. It means I'm a journalist. It means I'm a historian, right? And it also means that I'm a creative force with the pen. At least that's what I intend to be. To share things uniquely, to share insight. And as we do on PremierHipHop.com, as we leaders, I, my brother Paragon designing it all, and my brother Waze at the vanguard, we work to give you real journalism. Journalism that hip-hop needs, journalism that's embedded. Embedded meaning that we are actually taking part in this culture. That this culture isn't something that we've appropriated. That we've said some kind of justification that it was made by them, but now used by us in any way that we feel like it. In fact, it's quite different. We find creativity in taking it to another level. Just as we have these great ancestors that created this art form, and ancestors they are, so many have passed away, remembered in perfection to too many. But this art form is intended to be of the impoverished and to be a countercultural force that speaks ideas, that speaks understanding, and relays a true culture of power that brings in equality. And equality to our people. And sometimes that starts with really the militancy of a simple work of art. And that's what hip-hop has. That's what the epic nature of hip-hop is. So now, as we start this PowerWrite podcast, I'm describing to you my element as a hip-hop writer and why I took to these airwaves. In my 20-year experience as a journalist in hip-hop culture, it's not enough to just cover the artist. Because it's not enough that we haven't really had a journalistic force. We've had newspapers, magazines, and such. We've had our own magazines, and this is something that is going to be a real issue for today's topic. That leads into our guest. But this element is one that is set to preserve the other elements. That every journalist that really understands that he is a historian of the moment, the historian of the moment that actually aids the historian of the future looking back into the past. For that to be so, the journalist of today, the journalist, the man of this moment, the cataloger of this moment must have an understanding of the culture that he is dealing with. He cannot be a distant sociologist that just gives westernized and biased outlooks on what he sees in the guise and in the language of unbiased and objective scientific methods that have not worked to aid us in understanding what our culture is. So as this writer, though, and People may know me now as Skillustrator Low, thanks to the honor bestowed to me by Rakim Supreme Shabazz, aka the original Rudy Low of the Low Lives, you know, and who gave me my L's. The great Thurston Howell III, who named me Skillustrator, humbly honoring me. And now PowerWrite, a moniker that the great Bones Malone, really to me, the founder of this hip-hop element of writing, so honorably bestowed upon me. And as I write this element, as I work on this element, the idea is in these two hashtags. It isn't in the hashtag go try to find another writer with my kind of grammar. That's just the ego. That's just the hip-hop flair. But the hashtags that describe what this is the art on art and science on music. That we put a little bit of art into the art that we cover. That we make it daring enough. That we're not afraid to give our ideas of creativity nor our ideas of insights on the page when we cover the things that we grew up with. When we cover the things that other people ought to be growing up with now. So when we do that, that's what the art and art is for. That in every form, every way, whatever hip-hop is, to me, at its height, it's this black and brown culture. This culture of original people that have shared something that the whole world can do. But in the end, no, it's about the impoverished. It's about helping. It's about aiding our people to another level. And as I, myself, with the knowledge of self, see our people as creators themselves in their own creation, then I have to say that upholding the integrity and the dignity of creation is one of the highest and most honorable things to do. So as we go along, PremierHipHop.com focuses on this art and hip-hop, this hip-hop analyzation that is science on music. A little science, a little ideas, something that allows you for an appreciation of the music, allows for an appreciation of the music beyond just an immediate like and dislike, which is what the pop sectors of the industry, and I said pop sectors, I'm saying that without really knowing what sectors of the industry aren't pop anymore. Even this underground, that much of the great wealth that I'm mining from is still as such. So on that note, this PowerWrite podcast is going to consist of some building, some ideas from such, where if you've heard me before hosting the great DJ Toshi's Classic Storm Radio and those podcasts with excellent interviews and even more exclusive music, and also on the great Vandal Hour show where I have my PremierHipHop.com segment during the Vandal Hour, which is on DTF Radio. Those are great forums, but this is a forum where I, Sunez, your host, can go a little further with some of the insights that I'm trying to bring. And even though most of these insights, I would love to take them to the pen immediately, they're insights that I think that might also, in this digital world, will help out if you just listen to them. And radio has always been part of this element for me as well. Since I started on college radio with my brother Wars, my DJ co-host, back in 1995 at Boricua College and then Hunter College, right? WBMB, right? 590 AM, right? Where no one could hear it though, but like 5 people in the next room reading and studying as we interrupt them through the airwaves of the floor. But from those humble beginnings, radio and broadcasting ideas has been a love, and willingly this is something that becomes useful and willingly enjoyed by everyone out there listening, and I want to thank you beforehand. So before as we go though, the most immediate update is that Puerto Rico is still a colony, gentrification is still a menace, and good music still is the anomaly of our reverence. So with that said, know that what we have today leads me to my my immediate topic of discussion before we bring on our guest, and just so you'll see it in the description, of course. But our guest is Sleep Sinatra. I have an old crate interview from him nearly exactly a year ago, last August in 2015, when we built on his last album, which was one of the best albums of the year. And he comes back this year with Vibranium, which is one of the best albums. But before we get to that Sleep Sinatra crate interview, let's talk about a topic that is dear to my heart, and why, even though it is dear to my heart, it is still of relevance beyond the emotional cues and the emotional trials and tribulations that I have gone through to try to enlighten those on this topic, as any journalist of his own merit is enlightening himself as he learns and grows with it. And the topic is really is rooted in the idea that Latinos, brown people that were infected hundreds of years ago by the once conquered European Spaniard himself, who was led to the promised land of civilization by the Moorish black empires, and who decided to take all of those fruits and then turn it against them, exile them, initiate the Spanish Inquisition, and then sail across with the knowledge that these Moors had given them, and conquer new lands and appropriate the wealth and reconfigure the wealth of these indigenous lands, where particularly Boricua is where your host is immediately from as an original man. But before that, to really understand the relevance of this, though, and when we say something like Latinos are co-creators in hip-hop, and why or how this could have been that it was always overshadowed, right now it's not worthy of the written pen, because it needs to be even more definitive. But because there's so much talk about this discussion, I want to give some quick insights to help lead those that have sincerity for the discussion, and for all of you that have no sincerity for the discussion and only intend to find some kind of way to counter that it is irrelevant or that it isn't true. Well, let's see what you got after I throw out these variables of ideas. First, let's talk about something that goes before the idea of saying that a music or a culture is black and brown. People don't really argue whether a culture is black or brown. Yet they often argue whether a music is black and brown. And this is an argument that really is a United States argument. The United States is the home of the greatest appropriators of art and culture. Why? Well, because it has to match up with also the United States of America being the greatest creators of recorded and documented art in the history of the modern world. That is to say, though, that the music itself, the arts itself, were turned into an industry. So we may have musics of black and brown peoples all over the world, all over this side of the hemisphere. But the most that you'll find, though, is of those in the United States, right? We need only look at jazz and the wonderful brilliance of jazz and its culture. And if we really study, much rooted in the culture of hip-hop, of originality, learning the technicalities of an art, and then taking it to another level where that individual must perform his trombone, his trumpet, his clarinet, his piano, his voice in a unique, original creativity that is always unlike the others, but has a foundation in the principles and the ethos of what he originally had learned from. And that's jazz. And yet, if we tear it down to simpler forms, it sounds exactly and is exactly much like hip-hop. But one of the misnomers to understand, and as a philosophical note, to hopefully we get some discussion on this with some kind of usefulness, and not usually like the after ray trolls that come after the rays of the sun have come, is that music itself is often, there's a truism of music. A truism is a saying that is assumed to be true but isn't true, so it's a truism. You know what I mean? And one absolute truism that it really isn't shown to be true at all, or isn't even tried to show to be true, is that music is a universal language. What I'm saying is that music is not a universal language. A language is something that conveys an idea and that it is immediately understood. See, a language is a form of communicating ideas. And if it was a universal language, then it would be universally understood anywhere that you went. And what people say music is a universal language is that for many of our musics, we have an anecdotal view. Anecdotal meaning that we have a view that says that I experienced this, and so this is a valid experience. Now, anecdotal viewpoints are worthwhile. And the reason music becomes a universal language as a truism is because the anecdotal evidence multiplies to millions. You see? So everyone hears the classic Thriller from Michael Jackson, and everybody bought it. It is the most bought record of all time. It is a classic album by all those who've really analyzed it. So it must prove, based on the excellence of that record, that music is a universal language. What I'm saying is not a universal language. You see? A universal, because to make music a more universal language, it has to lose more and more of its ideas that it communicates in the language. Whereas I propose that the only universal language is mathematics. Mathematics is the universal language. So when we say things like supreme mathematics is a universal language, right? Peace to my family, the gods and the earths. When we say that mathematics is a universal language, what we say is that any interpretation of that spoken language has to mean the same thing. And it cannot be altered or accepted based on like and dislike. And it cannot be further justified by the amount of acceptance that it has. If we say a simple idea of a man's distance away from the sun as he is on the earth, we'd say it's always at least 93 million miles away. This would be a mathematical concept. You see? A mathematical fact. When the physics of something is computed, it is a mathematical fact that cannot be disputed. So it is a universal language because it can be put into any other form of communication. And yet, the ideas, those mathematical notes in there, those mathematical ideas are still transferable. Now, mathematics has much universality in it, meaning that notes have a universal way of being done. They have a way of where, and it can be even seen as a universal language because those notes will be the same no matter how anyone says it, and it depends upon how the notes are said. But here is where it is not a universal language, you see? Because the depth of a universal language is in the ideas that are inside of those notes, you see? And that so they are always held under interpretation even though they are universal notes in music, you see? In mathematics, at its highest form, whatever mathematical structure that the computation of the equation is, the interpretation of the equation may lead to new ideas, as all languages must be impaired and endowed with to be able to hold. It still would not change the immediate fact of that. And when we apply music as a universal language, what makes it a worse truism is that even if we were to say that these notes, these ideas are universal, the only proof that has ever been given and the only use of this statement, music as a universal language, is to applaud a monumental showing of mass appeal of like and like for something. You see? But no one hears the worst of records and says that it's a universal language. No one notes how a song that was terrible, at least for me, and popped to the entire world 10 years ago, and unless it has the attachment of memories to it, it is today a horrible song. You see? So to say it is a universal language is really a way of denouncing the idea that there are people that have communicated unique, controversial, and specific ideas inside of the music itself. That they have spoken a language, and the actual language has not been translated to understand it. People have not translated the idea. When we go deeper into the ideas of, let's say, salsa, and we find the roots of this first urban genre of New York City, created, really molded and manifested there. And I say not created because as a genre, it's really an idea of a genre. But that's for another day to discuss. When we talk about this concept of something molded, something that is created, we can look deeper into salsa and see some of its Santeria roots. We can see how people have always talked about the language of the drum. But that language of the drum is being spoken of today as just like and dislike. And our people feel a certain soul to it, a certain essence in it. And they say that music is a universal language. But it is incorrect to say that it is a universal language, because what's being implied by that is saying that the message is universally one of all the same. When we do not and have not taken the time to actually translate what the message is in that music to say what the language of music is saying, because music is indeed a language. What I am saying is it is not universal, because by universal we're saying that it appeals, that it must be correct and must be ideal for everyone, when we're only saying it in bracketed genres that appeal to individuals. So the statement is a truism. It is missing components that are essential to getting to a deeper understanding. And this is where we fall victim to the place of, we begin on a philosophical note, that is, to fall victim to the place that Latinos are in their place as black, just as blacks, or the labeled blacks, as co-creators of this genre. And I say labeled because for me, we're all just different shades of black. We're all just different shades of black, genetically, mentally, and spiritually. So when it comes into the music, we know that the South Bronx area during the 70s was mostly populated by Puerto Ricans. We know that it was filled with generally, if we gave it a 3-bracket system, a holy trinity of ethnicity of African Americans, Jamaicans, and Puerto Ricans. And let's simplify this so that way we just see it here as that. One of the things that is left out, excuse me, what is left out, and by the way, if you're noting that there is music in the background, that is Sleep Sinatra's Vibranium, who we are going to get into with an archive interview later in this podcast. But when we talk about Latinos as co-creators, understand this. The path that leads to the roots of a music first begin with the culture of the people that made the music. That is, that the culture of the Puerto Rican, the culture of the Jamaican, the culture of the African American was all black, all rooted in the African elements of the drum. And understand that if we focus on Puerto Ricans now, when we leave out Puerto Ricans and Latinos as co-creators of hip-hop, we are not only doing a disservice to Latinos, we are doing a disservice that cannot just be repaired by these same publications saying that they are, or these same media outlets that say that they are, and we can't leave them out the narrative. Because as a writer in these magazines, The Source, Double XL, Vibe, Stress, and of course Stress doesn't count because they always advocated that. They always were they are even founded on Latino brothers. But the majority of the mass media I was at, they never put an emphasis on this. In fact, they often edited it out of my own declarations and articles and pieces that I would submit or edit through as an editor. And this is where it becomes unacceptable, because many Latino MCs were often told, just like Fat Joe told me years ago, around 1999, before they released their first Terror Squad album, that he himself was told to be a freestyle singer. Freestyle itself having its own roots in segregated appropriation, because the segregation of black and brown from each other in this hip-hop culture is also a faster way to appropriation. So when we have in the roots of things, then we must look at the roots of a black culture that all three of those major ethnicities had that make hip-hop. And when you denounce one, you're able to denounce others. Just like Imani Perry has written that Jamaicans were not really a core essence of it, even though Kool Herc was doing this breakbeat, even though the style of the toast is an aspect of MCing, even though the instrumental concept is coming mainly from the way they pressed up instrumentals out there. Even though the large speakers are also from that nature of our great Jamaican peoples. So when we look at it like this, right, what we really have is a culture, and let's deal specifically with Puerto Ricans and Latinos. For instance, the Cuban roots of son allowed musicians to travel into the United States and be a foundation of jazz, and just as Dizzy Gillespie has noted, bring polyrhythms that weren't there. Now, our African Americans are as black as you can get. So how did we then have to say that it is the complex polyrhythms, and this is something Dizzy Gillespie himself said, are what finally got into jazz through the Cubans. Now, why am I saying this? Because if we fast forward, these advanced polyrhythms become a core of the selections of where the majority of the breakbeats come from. The Apache Band, for one, is a great example. Jimmy Castor's work, right, was filled with complex polyrhythms. These polyrhythms weren't just rooted in, let's say, African American musicians' genius here. They're mainly here because Cubans directly brought them, because that's what the Latin Caribbean was preserving. And at the time that hip hop was, here's another aspect to think about. This also leads into dance. And when there is an argument that b-boys weren't really Latino in the beginning, some of this is true. If we talk about the majority, we have always been segregated to each other. And no matter what anyone says, the African American then and the African American now continues to be the brunt of the mental racism of the entire world. And the symbolism of what a brown man, another African man, original black and brown from all over the world, when they come here as immigrants, the worst that they could be is to be like an African American. This is the lie and the mythology that is taught to our people as we come here, as we migrate, and as we are indoctrinated under this colonial mindset that shifts from one place to another. So now when we see this idea, understand that the segregation of black and brown has already taken place by the 1970s. But understand this though, as the great forums of hip-hop culture develop into these elements, these main elements of first DJing, And then the DJing leads into what? The DJ has to select breaks. He thinks of the break to repeat, but they have to be based on the acceptance of the audience. And it is no coincidence. It is no coincidence that these selections are filled with what I'm going to say is Latin percussions, meaning polyrhythmic African rhythms that have been preserved and elevated specifically and uniquely by the Latin Caribbean, from Cuba to Puerto Rico to the Dominican Republic. So now, when that travels to the Americas into the 70s, we see certain things that are absolutely black that lead into other black culture, just as blues leads into jazz as a root, and jazz leads into R&B and soul, and all of this leads into hip-hop, just as James Brown leads into hip-hop, just as that leads into the way DJs spoke on the radio when they began rhyming and riffing and being dynamic with the wordplay. And it leads to those MCs. But understand that the idea of MCing, for example, was always there. But if we start with the DJ, we already have the music is already rooted in Latin polyrhythms as much as it is in the Jamaican rhythms, which, by the way, both are rooted in the rumba, the pure African rhythms. And our African rumba may differ slightly in Jamaica, but it is wholly alike to those in Cuba, and wholly alike to those in Puerto Rico when we listen to a bomba and a plena. So now we have these black roots that are all alike and are all merging into this hip-hop. And when it merges, though, those become selections for the DJ, because the audience itself is mixed as well. Mixed as it goes along, not just by people, not just by saying these black and brown people, oh, there was more black in the audience, there was more brown. The point is that those labeled black and separated from brown artificially were already united by those forms of music they accepted and also their dance forms. Because many of the early uprocking forms are as much the African American music forms traveling from the swing time era all the way to the disco dances of the hustle. But we also have the styles of son dancing, the styles of salsa, descarga dancing, and all those dances that were done with the guajira and the guaguancó, and all of those dynamic dances became part of the uprock. See? It's all rooted in there. And instead of us looking at hip-hop and seeing the unity of black and brown and its movements, and saying that hip-hop is a realization that, hey, all of this is the same, then let's all do it together and see what we get when we put it together, we allowed the media to say otherwise. We allowed the media that could not market Puerto Ricans to say otherwise. And so it led into and allowed segregation. So when the easily labeled blacks, those easily labeled men of blackness, men and women of blackness, are allowed to make music, and the label of being this is a black music, African American music, and all those who are not easily labeled, such as light-skinned brothers like myself, then they are left out. And some of them are turned to singers, and some of them believe their own propaganda. Like there was one freestyle singer that once said that what the blacks do has soul. And when we sing freestyle music, we have sabor, which is flavor. Oh, he said we have passion. You see? So you allow a cliche to be the distinguishing factor in a false segregation, a false separation. Some of this, though, is noted when I was in 1995. I was asked to be a consultant for the Center for Puerto Rican Studies at CUNY's Hunter College under the great auspice of Juan Flores and directly the great Raquel Rivera. Juan Flores, remembered in perfection, one of the great scholars who wrote many books on this music, showing and proving Latinos as co-creators, with books such as From Bomba to Hip Hop and other works. I directly worked with Raquel Rivera, and much of the things I said became a core and a helpful core of her thesis book that became New Yorkers from the Hip Hop Zone. And in this Hip Hop Zone book, just as I had back here in 1995, just as I am now in 2016, I am saying that this is a black and brown culture. And even though we were made to not fit in and not think that what X-Clan was talking about was to us, that the knowledge of self that Poor Righteous Teachers was speaking about is the same knowledge of self that I have learned and that I have been teaching for the last 16 years at the same school that it all roots in, Allah School in Mecca, meaning in Harlem, meaning that this is all one black culture. And if you have a problem with black, then welcome to Oppression 101, because you're also just another colonial subject who's been indoctrinated real well. You see? And now when the culture's appropriated, and now that when Latinos can be sold a little bit more easy, right? Now we can be in the soup a little bit. Now it's easy to mix us in. You see? Now, when we talk about Latinos and the creation of hip-hop, I took you through two elements. I took you through the idea of the beginnings of DJ and the selection. I took you through the dance that is rooted in many of the forms and styles that are as African-American as they are Latin rooted. We have the polyrhythms, the drum, the dance. Those brown brothers that become heralded by the work and the pioneering work of Crazy Legs. Salute to that brother who founded Rocksteady Crew and who elevated the transmission of b-boying. Is just part of it. But what I'm saying is that it is this segregation that we don't look at the factors that allows certain things to happen. It isn't just the media. It isn't just the industry as well. Here are some other factors. When we look at now the other two elements. The other element that is unmentioned because people argue themselves, those pioneers of graffiti argue whether it is a part of hip-hop. And that's not the argument that we'll go into today. But if graffiti is a part of hip-hop, then we won't even have to worry about acknowledging the presence of Latinos, Boricuas. All we have to do is you better take a trip up to Hunts Point or any area of the South Bronx and see that legacy of just one crew, Tats Crew, the legendary Tats Crew. Had the honor of building with them and interviewing them back when I was just a writer at my college, and build with Bio, Nicer, and BG 183rd. Just part of the crew of a large, impeccable, legendary crew. But if we go, let's talk about the MCing. What people don't understand is that we lose our roots, we lose our connection to why this music appeals to us and why it is a language that we appeal to, because we have always been communicating in this fashion. The root of all black music is original creativity. And that is why in jazz, through the blues, there was always an element of isolation in learning the forms. You learn the form and then it isolates you so that you perform your art in a unique way. Original creativity. And that becomes the solos of a legendary John Coltrane. But let me tell you how it becomes part of the MC. Just as it becomes part of Billie Holiday, always singing can sing the same song in a different way 100 different times. This uniqueness of the MC, the master of ceremonies, transmits into all black music. And the thing is, though, is that, and dare I say that I have to mention KRS-One, even though I don't want to, because KRS-One is in the middle of moments of shaming us all in not putting the best part first, in who he focuses on as the primary reason for any conversation regarding Bambaataa and the children that he is alleged to have abused. Bambaataa cannot be the focus. Bambaataa isn't supposed to be the focus. It's supposed to be the children first. And Bambaataa being the leader of a youth organization, it is even more heinous to even think of Bambaataa, your friend, first. I got a friend like that. I'd wish that my enemies would return me to the essence immediately. But when we get back to this MCing thing, KRS-One had a good point, and I'm not a biter, right? There's no Bronson Droog juice drunk here. But in Gospel of Hip Hop, the last chapter of Gospel of Hip Hop, even through all this, I would recommend it because it's a history of the music and the culture, that last chapter. He notes, though, that there was more of a need for African Americans to have MCing than anyone else. And I dare say that to all the scholars and all the thinkers about this, to think past this. Besides the segregation that we had, besides us Boricuas looking down on our brothers and saying, those morenos, those niggas, while we, us spics, look down on them, right? Those all play a hand in allowing the industry to do this, right? We have been taught to think that we are different, other than ourselves, and so we must be different than each other. But out of that trilogy of creating ethnic groups that I've narrowed it down to, I'm not limiting it to, I'm narrowing it down. The African American, the Jamaican, the Puerto Rican. The African American, though, had a forum, but was developing a new, more harsher, more deliberate form. The thing is that the Jamaican and the Puerto Rican already had forums that were new and developing right then and there, that were much more powerful than what hip hop was in its beginnings. And so technically, it may or may not have been as appealing. So we have Jamaicans. Kool Herc is here, and dance hall is becoming part of the culture. And I don't mean dance hall. Certainly not that reggaeton shit or any of the other bastardized forms, or the lovely, more popular forms of the 90s. What I mean by dance hall is the stuff of Big Youth, the Toasting Records, but also the roots reggae I'm talking about. The titan of all black and brown icons in all black and brown music. The titan of all revolutionaries. The first anthemic individual that you have to play when the revolution comes, and certainly when this revolution is preparing itself, is the great Bob Marley. And so roots reggae already had voices that were in forms that says so much more than what hip hop had just begun to get to. So to me, we have to ask, so was the Jamaican of that era, was he like Kool Herc, making something that was trying to initiate because he was already with the blacks and being assimilated somewhat? Because assimilation is not always a negative term. If Herc was being assimilated, as he says, he was being assimilated to the brethren of poverty here where he was. But did the Jamaican really, what was his attachment to the roots reggae and that forum? This is something that needs to be told. And it had to be something worthwhile. Because, as a side note, to me the entire health movement, especially in New York City, the healthy ITAL movement, what leads to us being vegans and eaters of only the living foods, the ITAL food, is the Jamaican rooted in Rastafarianism, whose culture is rooted in the expressions that also include roots reggae music. So was the form of the MC something that was seen as too simplistic, too lowly, pedestrian? That is worthy of discussion. What's also worthy of discussion is the Puerto Rican itself. At the time that hip-hop has its infancy, there's already, and it will become only the second urban genre created in New York City, because one has been created literally a few years ago. The roots of salsa is not as a musical genre, it is as an idea of merging, an idea of synergy of ideas, meaning that its roots are in Cuban son, and those technical forms are jazzed up and also functified with the many genres that can be added to it. Meaning that the way salsa was played in such a free-range salsa mode, jazz mode, I should say, it allowed for experimentation and also allowed for the blending of other genres. Add to the fact that the first step to musicians not having any music and then using music that was there and making breaks, hip-hop, is to have musicians that are not formally trained but have instruments that they cannot play. And because they can't play this very well, they learn themselves. They learn how to play the congas themselves. They learn by listening. They learn the 4/4 and the rhythms by ear, not technically in schools. Remember, many of the Cuban musicians that were in Cuba were highly educated. And so they learned this. They learned this in two ways. They were educated, but they also learned it as a communal activity. Both ways made for like the roots of an incredible music. And it could be said that son is nearly as influential as jazz as a root to all the musics of our people that we hear in this northern hemisphere of recorded music by our people. And the polyrhythms I mentioned on the Latin side, right? And the countless levels of original creativity that merges out of nearly every instrument that your black man and woman picked up on this northern hemisphere in the United States of America particularly, and was recorded doing. So when we do this, when we have this like this, understand that a good salsa singer is not a salsero. That's a term later used to differentiate. But the roots of it, I'll call them a sonero, because they had to be rooted as a sonero, a singer of son. They had to know those roots. They had to be able to sing the fast, the slow, the ballad, the charged jam session, the descarga, the guaguancó, the guajira, all the different tempos. But here's the thing that many people don't know, that MCing was already part of it. The character, the nature of the singer was crucial. And when you hear a great salsa song, whether it's La Voz Classic, El Cantante, or his 1971 song, El Sonero Mayor, meaning the best, the number one, the grand sonero, the best. Sounds like, right? The MC, right? The best MC, the grand MC. After those, in a salsa song, after those, and rooted in son, so we'll generally say son, after those major verses that are written are performed for the song, you have a call and response chorus. But when the chorus calls, the response is a line that is created off the head, off the top of the head by the sonero. Then the chorus, the call of the chorus again. And then the next response has to be something that rhymes with the previous response that sonero gave. Yeah, they rhyme. And they rhyme on the spot. And that's why when you used to see a sonero, you didn't just see them do their song as is. A lot of times they did, because the refrane, the sayings, the lines, the bars, the verses that they kicked in the studio for the original song was so unique that people wanted to hear those lines again. Like when Lavon, El Cantante, said, I don't sing with a skirt. I rock pants, bitch. I added the bitch, but that's the essence, the way he said it. These are MCs. So we have the major root. I've narrowed it. I've deliberately generalized as African American, Jamaican, and Puerto Rican, and yet all three of those have a root of MCing. All three have clear roots in artistic endeavors throughout graffiti. All three have roots in the dance forms that get melded and gelled into what becomes b-boying. And all three have roots in the nature and the sound of the way the original music that is used as a core is taken from. So don't tell me Latinos are not co-creators of hip-hop, because that means you haven't done your homework. And don't tell me it doesn't mean something, because the fallacies of today don't just do harm to those of today. They do harm to those of tomorrow, because they don't know their roots. They won't know their roots. And then they can be other than themselves much more easily. They can assimilate to all that is against them easier and more willingly. And isn't that why we made hip-hop? So that way there wouldn't be an assimilating of any sort. So that wouldn't be appropriation. So there wouldn't be any fucking biters taking shit. Now with that said, as we're almost 50 minutes into this build, I want to talk to you about a brother that we're about to have on. I'm about to play his record. His name is Sleep Sinatra. Last year he made 3 works. He had an album. I believe it was Monsters and Children. Right? Let's look at the catalog. Right? When we look at the catalog, he had an album called Monsters and Children 2 years ago. That was where I first found him, but he has tons of records on his Bandcamp. And then he found, last year I wrote about Shamanique, but he also had 2 EPs he released that year. One of them was As Above, and the other was Extended Waves, excellent add-on works. So he really was a prolific artist last year. When I ranked his album, let's see where I put it. I put it number 12 on my reel of 2015. And on that reel of 2015, I noted this. I said, lo-fi analog ruggedness through wildly dissonant EQ levels with a consistency of pensively smooth lyricism. Sleep Sinatra is an MC you sit and listen to with attention. His beat choices are filled with sinister yet unique musical variations, from the musical hooks to the drum work. Yet his effortless ease to flow makes his work move like well-flowed books of a favorite author. I can't say that I think any differently of him. In fact, I think when I look back on what I wrote there last year, at the end of the year, I think that I've been right on, and I continue to be right on with it. Sleep Sinatra really is the kind of MC you sit back and listen to. He's the kind of young brother that really studies himself. He studies his craft. And out in Nebraska, where he's from, as a brother with African American and Mexican roots, he studies his culture. He studies his roots. And he fights daily against the assimilation that is thrust upon his area, his livelihood, and he doesn't back down. But with that said, following is the conclusion of this show with a great interview with Sleep Sinatra that I was honored to do. Right, last year around the same time in August. For those who have tuned in, I want to thank you. Right? I want you to go to I'd like you to go to premierhiphop.com. Do the knowledge to this art and science on music, and stay tuned for more art and science on music reviews and and ideas, particularly about my brother Sleep Sinatra. Peace.
Yo, peace, man. Maintaining, man, just, sitting there in the lab was actually writing some things, taking a couple notes and whatnot.
All right.
Good to finally be able to speak with you, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah, no doubt.
Human sense, I guess you could say.
Yeah, no doubt, man. You know what's funny is that, no matter how hard you try to find MCs and stuff to write about in music, and people always complain about hip-hop, I always find that there's too many of y'all brothers that are great that I can't even find. You know, like you're asking me to check out your work, and I'm like, yo, this is a seasoned motherfucker right here, sending me mad shit. You know, and I'm like, but it bugged me out though when I heard where you was from and shit. And I'm like, how the fuck did an MC with your skill be out in fucking Nebraska? Is it right?
Word. Yeah, man. I mean, this is the birth state of Malcolm X as well. Not a lot of people realize that either. There's deep-rooted black communities here all throughout Nebraska, especially in Omaha and Lincoln. You know, a lot of artists that grew and just never really became anything. Never really sought out any other type of ventures outside of their own local existence. Are still here, you know. That's our grandfathers, our fathers and stuff. So, you know, we definitely are influenced by outside sounds. Of course, you know, I grew up on Wu and Jedi Mind and, you know what I'm saying, Chicago MCs like Juice and a lot of outside influences as well. But there's always been art here. There's always been there's always kind of been our own sound generating here a little bit.
Not to categorize, but is that sound, you know, not it's hard to cliche a sound and categorize it though, but is the sound what you would say is like, you know, real hip hop, or is it like, you know, is it southern, is it, you know, is it commercialized? Like,
see, I think the crazy thing about being from Nebraska, essentially the middle of America, you know, the middle of the wilderness, is that, like I said, there's so many influences. Like one of the main interstate roads, I-80, it goes through here. So there's all types of we come across all types of people with all types of tastes. You know, so there's a lot of people here that have a predominantly Southern style. Whereas opposed to, there's also a very deep-rooted, real hip-hop, in my definition, real hip-hop sound. There was cats doing it in the 90s, pressing vinyl in Omaha, you know what I'm saying? Like, that I don't even know if it's in existence anymore, but, you know, if you do the knowledge on that, there was people that are still deep-rooted in the hip-hop community to this day. There's graffiti crews, you know what I mean? Culture has always existed here as well. I think it's just a variation of styles, you know. Being that we're right in the heart, essentially, of this country.
That's definitely peace, you know what I mean? And you know, I say that in a funny way because I'm not surprised that there's great MCs everywhere, you know what I mean? Wherever the original man is, there's always great art, you know. But you know, people's perceptions, you know what I mean? People's perceptions of things, you know what I mean? And now the music is different, where a brother like you doesn't have to travel everywhere to share his music. You know what I mean?
Right.
And now the whole world can, right. And now the whole world can hear your music and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But you know, just on those levels though, it's real peace to me that you shared your music to me, and also reached out to me though to learn, you know, this knowledge of self and stuff, because in all your records I've been hearing it though. If I had heard your records without knowing you, I've been like, yo, this brother need to get that knowledge. You know what I mean?
Word. Yeah, definitely.
You know?
Definitely. And I think that you know, that's always something that I've kind of wanted to do is, you know, again, when I reached out to you originally, I stated, you know, to be a melanated man in the middle of America, in the middle of this wilderness, it's hard for us to truly have a knowledge of self. You know what I'm saying? I see a lot of cats that get sucked up into the culture and the society that we confined to in our own environment, they sort of become that. Because there is a black community here. There's especially a Hispanic community here as well. Nebraska's kind of very multicultural in the sense that a lot of immigrants outside of the U.S. tend to come here because of job opportunities. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of diversity in that sense. But I just felt like it was important for me as an MC, especially being conscious and knowing that my taste and intelligence were outside of, I guess, the mainstream taste. I felt it was important for me to know what I was saying. You know, I'm influenced by Wu-Tang. I'm influenced by RZA, you know, and that I remember vividly. And this just kind of shows how young I am still too. For tomorrow, the 5% album came out, and I was still a teenager at the time. You know what I'm saying? And that actually influenced me heavily, sonically, just because it was a good album. But the knowledge that he was speaking on it intrigued me. You know, it intrigued me, and I've always dealt with racism here. Being in the middle, right here in the middle. I grew up fighting farm boys. You know, there's a lot of cultural division. So,
and you know that's
it. Very important for me to be acknowledged in what I was saying as an MC.
Well, let me ask you a question about that, because I think people are very interested how it goes around everywhere in America. And, you know, when I build with brothers from LA, there's great division between original people there. Blacks and Mexicans hate each other. You know, so the black and brown divide is very intense, though. Here in Now Why, black and brown division is almost dependent on what borough you in. You know what I mean?
Word.
So,
that's very interesting. I was kind of wondering what the dynamic of that is.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, I'm much older than you, so like in the 80s, you know, I'm from Medina in Brooklyn, and I grew up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood in Sunset Park, but you couldn't really travel to other Brooklyn neighborhoods like, you know, like Brownsville, of course Brownsville, because that was a low, you know what I mean? If you know, that's like the worst of the worst neighborhood. But you couldn't travel other places unless you was with somebody, and vice versa. Like, brothers couldn't travel into Sunset if they didn't know, like, you know, a Boricua dude in there, you know? And and you know, in the Bronx too, you know? And now it's a little bit different. There's more Latinos, so people get more of an idea. But then there's other places like LA where brothers tell me that, yo, Mexicans and blacks don't get along. And then here comes this brother out like yourselves, you know, and damn, he's a mix of both. So it's like, both of those original people's bloods is in him. So it's like, wow, you know, how's the dynamic with that in the communities when you coming through, you know?
At times, you know, it could be difficult because the majority of the black community that is in Nebraska, if they're not here, you know, almost ancestrally, like their whole lineage wasn't born here in Nebraska.
Right.
A lot of times they come from southern states. They'll come from Georgia or they'll come from Mississippi. There's a lot of black families and communities here that started in Mississippi. They all migrated up here. You know, so being melanated myself, but being a light-skinned brother, because I am half Hispanic, half black, I grew up having to fight white kids, you know, because I was at times I'd be one of the only colored people in school or in activities, you know, so I'd be fighting white people, but at the same time, my own brothers, because of the Willie Lynch system, how they inbred that into us, I had to fight brothers, the dark brothers that were just jaded towards me because I was light, you know what I'm saying, and a little bit more articulate, so they would feel some type of way, had feel an inferior complex, and we normally would end up fighting. So it was difficult at times, you know, trying to maintain the balance, but you know, mine at the end of the day, I still was able to connect with some good-minded people. It's just it's very complex, and I think that's for anybody that's biracial or multiracial in this society, in this machine right now.
I think so, yeah, absolutely. You know, and the thing is, though, with original people, what's sad is that technically, with dealing with this knowledge, technically, you're not really biracial. You're multi-ethnic because you're original on both sides. So you multi-ethnic. So it's just the divisions of original peoples. Really, I don't know what lesson you ever got and stuff, but there's a lesson. Why does the devil call our people Africans? And it talks about calling us Africans to try and mix and divide. It's not saying a negative connotation to African, but Elijah was very clever to note for the people he was giving it to the negative connotation of African and saying that they call us that just to divide us, though, to make us think that we're all different. You know what I mean? And
that's knowledge, guys. See, that's a perfect example of why I reached out to you, because being a conscious brother here again, I'm gonna reiterate, it's hard for me to find other brothers again because so much of the community is just caught up in what society sees us. So most of the brothers that are conscious and who have knowledge and stuff are either in prison and found that in prison and are still there. The deepest brothers I've met are when I've been in jail. That's just being real. The deepest brothers I've met that have given me jewels. Matter of fact, peace to God and Raw. He's serving a bed right now. He just gave me some knowledge on the Husia, some ancient Egyptian texts a while back that I've been knowledgeable a little bit. But it's hard to find accurate lessons and accurate math and accurate, supreme alphabet. That's why I reached out to you, because I didn't want to be one of these cats out here that are claiming God and not saying things accurately. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Right, absolutely. I'll say this though, because I want to know more about, how you started to do all this stuff. So nobody knows your story. So you were born in Nebraska. Am I wrong?
No, you're correct. Indeed, I was born here in Nebraska. Let's see, December of 1990. My mother is Hispanic. My father was kind of involved in the drug trade before I was even conceived, and to this day, people don't know whether he committed suicide or was murdered. So I didn't really have a father figure growing up. When I was 7, my mom passed from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's a rare type of cancer. So after that, I just kind of bounced around from family member to family member. It kind of gave me a sense of not really belonging anywhere. So my mind tended to roam outside of what you would deem regular activities for kids. I was very enamored in books. I would read books heavily, and I was inspired by my grandmother. My grandparents were intellectual people, and I think that kind of stimulated my mind to lean toward the arts in general. You know what I'm saying? And as I grew, of course, I started listening to music, and the lyrics would hit me harder. I always loved music. I was sing as a child. So it progressed to me being conscious or starting to activate my consciousness as a youth and wanting to express myself and express my feelings in a form that I found to be fun and entertaining. So I began writing rhymes. It's like 13. There's a brother by the name of Marcus Dupree Franklin. I don't know where this brother's at, wherever he's at, teach that man. But he was the first person that put me on the track. He was a singer, and I don't know if I would really consider him an MC. He was more just an entertainer, but I guess he saw potential in what I was doing. I happened to show him some rhymes. He's a little bit older than me. Put me on the track, and I loved it.
How old were you when this happened?
At this point in time, when I first recorded, I was like 15 and 14.
Okay.
Yeah, but it was nothing. It was nothing ever really serious. It was just like some demo type shit. We was all just young cats. But it was the first time actually recording myself and hearing myself over a beat, and I loved it. It became a passion, but I didn't really know how to pursue it myself. I didn't have knowledge of how to lay it down. So I just continued to write, continue to work on my craft. I actually moved cities, moved to a larger city here in Lincoln, where I am now. Just continued writing, and I eventually met up with my brother Itchy Bomb Hashface, who is the other half of our group, Source for Hire. Met up with him, he's a like-minded individual doing the same thing. I think we were around 16 or 17. We bought a program and a mic, just some real rugged basement type shit, and just sat and would write for hours and hours and hours, L's and write and try to perfect our craft.
Let me ask you a question about that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about that, because, and I interrupt here because the way you MC is a little different than a lot of other MCs. It's not heavy on like intense inflection. It's not, it's not trying to capture the attention of the people by grabbing them. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's basically trying to hypnotically engage them. And, whether you see it or not, that shit is extremely difficult to do. You know what I mean?
Honestly, it's much more, it's almost instinctual. I don't really know how else better of a way to describe it, because it's always been, MCing has always been, like I said, a release of expression to me. I wanted to define something to express myself, creatively. You know what I'm saying? Creatively. Like I used to draw before I ever did anything, before I wrote any rhymes, anything like that. I would just draw. But I wanted to find a way to say more than painting a picture. So I would paint a picture, try to paint a picture with words. I began trying to paint pictures with words. And I can do the straight battle rap, punchline, line for line type shit. I enjoy that as well. I'm a fan of the battle scene. I watch a lot of battles and shit, but I just feel like it's more of a passion. It's more of a part of me than an actual demonstration of skill. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I find that really peace though, because it's so introspective. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying I'm saying this. I find it a higher level of skill. I also am personally drawn to it though. You know what I'm saying? Because to me, that's that night shit. You know what I mean? That New York shit, that rugged shit, that shit that you sit back and listen to. You know what I mean? And it's just rare. You know what I'm saying? And it's rare to find it where you're at. You know what I mean? And I find it real peace that you developed it that way. You know what I mean? A lot of MCs your age don't even try to go for that. You know what I mean? And a lot of them might have the potential to develop that way. You know what I mean? And it's because if someone were to play some of your songs and stuff, they could immediately dismiss it and say, that's, it's just the tempo's too even and shit like that. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
You kind of got to get caught into it though and get swept up in it. And a lot of people aren't really good at that. There's very few listeners anymore. It's part of the reason why, is really why, I emphasize when I'm writing the science on music, to try to get people to say, look, this is not just a good album, but there's a little bit of a difference, with certain albums, And
Word, definitely. Yeah, I really appreciated and respected your review of Shamanic and Monsters and Children as well. All the love you've been showing me. That is definitely an art. Writing period is an art, and I think that's something that people fail to realize. And like you said, people aren't really listeners anymore. Again, cats my age are more infatuated with the materialism of rap. You know what I'm saying? They like seeing these cats with whatever designer is hot right now and whatever type of accessories they have on. They want to indulge in that. They want to be that. And it takes a certain amount of intellectualism and I think experience, because if you really listen to some of my music, I have some references in there that you're only going to understand if you've been through certain things. If you've dealt in certain environments, and I think that it takes a certain intellectualism and experience to really appreciate the craft anymore as lyricists. And there's a lot of good lyricists here, even locally, but they just tend to not even really try because they feel like they won't be heard. You know, which is a sad truth. I don't think that it will be a permanent thing. That's one of my main goals, is trying to unify a lot of artists in between here in Omaha. I just put on a show this last June 17th, I believe, at a venue here, and I'm going to continue to try and do that. Continue to try to bring artists here, continue to try to expand, and let people know that, you know, I'm not one of the only cats out here that have talent. There's a lot of people embedded within the culture, and there's a thriving culture within itself here.
That's real peace. You know what I mean? That's definitely peace. You know, and so, you know, going back to that whole bio, your whole life story here, you start to make tracks with Ichiban, and you know, hours and hours writing and stuff like that. When does it develop that you start to start to record and stuff, you know, and you start to release these albums that come about?
Well, see, at first we were kind of just doing it amongst ourselves, and Ichiban has an older uncle that is basically, I mean, he's old enough to be one of our older brothers. Not really that much of a distance in age. Peace to Lone, and if you ever don't happen to hear this or anything, but we more or less made his style HQ. He had a lab set up, a small home studio set up, and we fortified over there for a couple summers, you know what I'm saying, just sitting, smoking L's and writing, and we would record, and it would always kind of be this rough draft demo type of joint. And I would say, from that point until now, there were several different life experiences that changed my perspective on how to MC and what I wanted to do as far as being an artist. You know, I went to jail several times. I thought in cases almost ended up going to the penitentiary. Just a lot of lessons learned and a lot of experience gained overall. So I'd say about 18 and 19, me and Ichiban kind of, we settled down and disciplined ourselves. I believe, and this is also around the time that I had my first child. I was 18, going on 19 when she was born. Ichiban as well, which is pretty crazy, the synchronicity of things. I think I was 19 when I first released the Reaper Comic with a producer from San Bernardino, California, the Merchant of Death, aka MOD. It's the cat I connected with, you know, like you said, it's much easier now to reach out and get your music heard this day and age, through technology, through the internet. There's a cat that I reached out to during that time. We were kind of creating our sound, and he throw me some joints. So we put together this EP. I think I turned 19, and it just kind of gained more momentum than I had expected. I gained a little bit more fan base, so I decided, you know, to take it more seriously. And from there, it snowballed, and we continued to evolve and both releasing projects individually, and we dropped the EP, Nuclear Village, together. I believe it was last year. You know, just continuing to expand and evolve, and we're to the point we are now.
There's a note, you know, now going into this music, right? And that's a how many? Just out of curiosity, how many children you have?
I have two children.
Okay. Yeah, that's crazy.
My oldest, yeah, indeed. You know, I'm 24 right now, so being a young father is it's not an easy thing, man, because you have to discipline yourself in the process of becoming fully mature and having a fully mature mental yourself while still being a teacher, you know, becoming a teacher. And that's an important factor that not a lot of people do. There's a lot of young parents, but not a lot of them are maintaining their responsibilities, you know, so that's something that I'm trying to be able to handle.
that's real peace. You know, I got 2 kids myself, but I had my first child when I was 25, so you know, I definitely know, you know, how difficult it must be having them earlier. You know what I mean?
Yeah, indeed.
And that's you know, by default, the developed techniques, and then the issues that you bring up. If somebody didn't tell them how old you were, you sound like a much older MC. It's why in the last review for, you know, Shaman, I wrote that you was almost like a precocious car, because when I build with Kyle, there's a lot of things that he tells me that are very similar to the vibe that you have when you rhyme. You know what I mean?
Respect.
And you know, personally, I just like that. I like I love art that makes you, you know, sit back and think. You know, I relate to it because, you know, when I write stuff, it's clear that, you know, I always say I'm writing a concentrated sentence, because I always tend to write things that take you forever to read through and hold it for a while. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. I love that, and I think that is an attribute of intellectualism. You know, and other intellectuals appreciate that. It goes back to, you know, people bringing words like Khalil Gibran. I got this, you know, I love records. I got this little Khalil Gibran record. It's all dark, you know. If you really look at it in that sense, in that chamber, people just expressing themselves in the most unique and creative way. You know, I don't think there's anything more freeing than being able to write down any form of words that you want to. It's kind of like building an architecture in its own sense. You know what I'm saying? I don't mean to get too complex, but
no, that's peace, definitely. Yeah, I definitely see that. You know,
that's kind of the way that I look at writing in itself. You know, it's kind of like building your own architecture and being able to be the most innovative, and at the same time having the freedom to say whatever you want.
So when you're making, in general, as it developed over time, though, are these songs where you just, you know, you hear a beat and you just kind of flow and free write through them? Or do you have certain concepts you say, look, I need to get these ideas, particular ideas, when I hear a track, I have particular ideas? How does it?
I would say it depends. It depends, you know, on the current mood and the energy. I'm a big energy person. So for me, if the beat that I get sent is very structured and I'm feeling it, then I might want to be more precise and I might want to be more conceptual just because it is structured. You know, I might feel like adding my own structure to that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Whereas opposed to maybe it's just the mood I'm in that day and the certain vibe that the beat has. I might just sit down and write whatever comes out. You know, almost like on some automatic writing type speed. That's what I was just doing. I was over at the lab last night with Ichiban. We were building and writing, and you know, he was making some beats and things. And I mentioned it's almost like automatic writing sometimes with the way that the energy that you just manifest whatever comes out. And if it's dope, it's dope. And sometimes, you know, I'll say 9 out of 10 times when I do that, it turns out being something that I like and will use. It just really depends on the vibe and, you know, the way that the beat comes to me.
Well, you know, speaking about beats, right? Your albums all have a lot of different beat makers, you know, but there's definitely a unified sound. And a lot of times, like as a overall sound, I was trying to think about it, and I don't know, it just keeps making me think of like the sinister music in a monster movie, like a Japanese monster movie and shit. Like almost all your tracks have that kind of vibe and shit. Like they have that B movie vibe that's really ill. Because I don't know, in all the music I'm hearing today, I think that the music you use, and it could be by default or on purpose, I don't know, you'll tell me, but it's probably some of the most analog and lo-fi music that I've heard.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's definitely on purpose. I don't want to give people a perception of something I'm not. You know, like I didn't grow up in a rich environment. I definitely didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth. You know, like I said when we first started building on how I came to be now. I was just kind of moving from place to place. So, you know, you encounter a lot of bad things when you're on your own like that, and I just wanted that to reflect in my music. I wanted it to be raw, gritty, truthful, very analog. You know, and it comes back to me, she building musically. She got the SP404 when we were 17. We both had adult warrants, felony warrants. We were on the run from a juvenile center. Just, you know, wilding out this young kid, you know. And he got that just off of a crazy opportunity. And we sat on it because we were young kids writing rhymes. We didn't really have the discipline to sit down and learn how to use a beat machine like that. Right. So we kept it, and you know, time progressed, and now I'm getting ready to release an EP this Tuesday, matter of fact, that's completely produced by Itchy Bond, and he's been doing a lot of his own production as well as the group album that we have in store too. You know, it's a crazy progression. It's definitely meant to sound raw and gritty like that. We really wouldn't have it any other way. It's what we're inspired by, you know. So we try to keep that sound alive.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean? And you know, a lot of times people hear that as like the beginnings of something. Then when the artist progresses, and almost a lot of them do, and they're all, you know, whether they're legends or not, or just great artists or bad artists, right? They the you know, the moving away from that is like, oh well, you know, they got more money, they can do this, that, but it's nice to see all these records continually develop within that sound, within that vibe. You know what I mean? It's I just like that shit. You know what I mean? It's very refreshing to me. You know?
Yeah, it's I mean, again, it's a continuous evolution of something that we're trying to innovate, because here within Nebraska, within our own hip hop scene, there's not a lot of lo-fi artists even within itself. There are cats that contain that lyricism, and even some that you know, they do definitely have that boom bap sound, but there's not a lot that have that very analog, dusty,
yeah,
midnight type of shit. That's the type of shit we try to emulate, you know, and express, because that's what we write. That's what we vibe on. We were kids, you know. Like that's one of the most influential albums to me. Violent by Design as well. You know, just to name a couple gems. So those sounds definitely inspired me to create my own entity as far as what I wanted to capture and keep that sound alive.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, you know, it's a good point you make, because there's a lot of boom bap today, but it's very clean. You know what I mean?
Right.
Very clean, you know, and sometimes it gets a little boring to me. You know?
Yeah, it's not, it doesn't have that aggression to it, you know, and I think that comes from, there's a lot of kids, I like that there's an emergence of that golden era inspiration again. I like that, but at the same time, I don't feel like people are really doing the knowledge to it enough to understand what is, you know, accurate, like the authentic, that golden warm sound. That's what me and Itchy gonna try to build on a lot too. We try to capture that warm sound.
Right.
I don't really know how else to describe it. Like that feeling that Boss Pro gives you when you hear one of his joints.
Right.
There's definitely inspiration. You know what I'm saying? So I think there's a lot of kids that will hear maybe one or two Dilla joints and be like, you know, Dilla changed my life, and not know anything about Slum Village. You know, to give you an example of the mindset of a lot of the youth right now in terms of this emergence of boom bap inspiration. So we try to capture the shit that remains true to us. Because a lot of kids, if you even try to mention Jedi Mind, you mentioned 36 Chambers. A perfect example, I seen this kid rocking a 36 a Wu-Tang logo
That's crazy.
Man, these kids don't have the knowledge of what they think is cool.
You know what's funny is that you know, I've had an issue with that whole thing lately too, because when it comes to the woo stuff, because I see all the woo stuff that they throw out there, and they throw out things that I don't fit with what Wu-Tang is. So like, you know, a t-shirt is peace, you know what I mean? I got me a vest, you know, all that, a fitted, whatever, you know what I mean? But when you make, you know, fucking greeting cards or fucking car scent sticker, you know, when you make other kind of shit that's real gimmicky, you know what I mean? That's, or, you know, I seen like, yo, they're selling like a Woo beach ball, and I'm like, that's not the fucking point of the whole fucking movement. Like, to have a fucking, you know what I mean? Like, you celebrating the most heinous holiday, July 4th, and throwing a Woo beach ball. Like, what the fuck, you know what I mean? You just fucked up the whole point of the whole shit.
It's entertaining, but it's sad though, because I just don't really understand the logic behind it. But it's because the youth and the people that see that, it's almost, you know, it's symbolism. It all comes down to symbolism. They are enticed by that symbol. They see a lot of people wearing it, so they go with what they know. It's like cattle, you know. I mean, that's my perception of it. Anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely see that. I definitely see that too. You know.
It's also funny being a lyricist and being in the underground realm of MCs. It's hard to not get stigmatized as a woo rapper. There's been a lot of times where people have asked me, "Oh, are you a Killer B?" And like, I have no affiliation with that. I'm not on the East Coast. I don't want people to get it confused. You know, oh, he's trying to sound like woo, or he's fighting the East Coast sound. That's not at all the case. What I try to portray is hip hop. That is my essence. You know, it's hip hop. I write, you know, both graffiti and lyricism. I've always been a writer, and you know, I've always had a knowledge of hip hop since I was young. It's something that inspires me. So I don't want people to think, you know, oh, he's trying to bite this, or he's trying to sound like something that it's not, because that's not the case. And it's hard for a lot of MCs to not get caught in that threshold, because we do use a lot of influence, especially Ichiban. My brother Ichiban uses a lot of like kung fu references, and that's shit that we grew up on, you know, shit that we grew up on from listening to Woo and listening and our own shit. You know, Hard Boiled is one of my favorite movies.
You heard.
Shit like that, you know, inspires us. And I think, especially with the whole internet MC thing, a lot of cats are just internet MCs. They don't ever do live performances. They've never rocked ciphers, you know, on a corner. They've never really done anything like that. They just sit behind a computer with a microphone and try to release albums like that. And that's fine, and you know, if that's something you want to do as a hobby, but it's much deeper than that to us. And a lot of people that have access to that tend to oversaturate the market, you know, so it's,
I definitely see that. Yeah,
it's very interesting, man.
Yeah. Everything is a niche. You know what I mean? And a lot of times the good artists get thrown in a niche to make it simple, to make it, you know, easier to categorize it, or unfortunately, usually to dismiss. You know.
Word. Yeah.
Yeah, to dismiss. You know. Because from my experience, you know, and it's funny because you said you was born in Born Cypher. You know, I've been writing, you know, professionally since '94, so it's like almost all your life, you know. And so people really did, you know, the way of this, what you come into is, you know, now you have underground where it deliberately dismisses the skilled. Because it's easier to package, though. You know, the underground is as competitive and as fake as, you know, the commercialized segments, you know?
Right, yeah, and I think, and, you know, I didn't mean to kind of carry off of that topic, but that's more or less what I was trying to pinpoint. Is that it does completely dismiss the skill when it's oversaturated like that.
Yeah,
you know, it's a shame. A lot of great artists get lost in the mix like that. You know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, and there's, you know, I all I can say is I'm doing my part. I can't really do anything else, but
Salute to you, definitely.
That's
because,
peace.
you know, you cut on for a lot of great artists that need to be heard. You know, every review is always very articulate and well crafted. You know, I always try to support your endeavors as well. For, you know, love is love.
That's peace. That's peace. You know, I saw on some of these songs. Let's go through some of them though. I saw one of a brother put up some of your performance recently that you did, right? And I want to ask you about. I'm always curious about this, right? Because you know, for a brother that is as young as you have a large catalog. You know what I mean? And if you the 4 songs, I don't know. There were 4 videos he put up. I don't know if your whole set was just 4 songs, but I wanted to ask you about these particular songs because you did Black Atlas, you did Soul Caliber, you did Globe Runners, and you did Wind Patterns from that Extended Waves EP that you let me know about recently, which was really dope. You know what I mean? And now, you know, when you're choosing songs to do live and stuff, these are all the most recent works, so I guess that has something to do with it. But why those particular songs? I have an idea, and I might be able to guess, but I just want to hear how you see it, though. Like, you know, like choosing a song out of your catalog and stuff like that. Why those songs? You know, like why did you, out of Monsters and Children, why did you do Black Atlas?
Well, I think Black Atlas has always been, I guess you could say, a fan favorite. I haven't performed it that many times. I'd say maybe 3 or 4 times, but it always gets a good reception, and I think that it has a very relevant cultural reference, you know, in today's society. So that's something that's something I always enjoy performing because of the overall message. That's actually also got some radio play here locally.
Oh, that's peace.
The local radio station, KZWM 89.3, they showed me some love. As well as that song being published in a little local writers magazine called the Lincoln Underground.
Oh, that's peace.
So I was definitely fortunate to get some ears with that song. So that's one I always like to perform, given the opportunity. Yeah, those specific songs though, those I feel are the most high energy of my recent works.
I could dig that.
I really wanted to give people something high energy, but also very relevant. Because with Globe Runners, you know, I'm citing Darren Wilson, and
right.
I also mentioned Dorner. You know, again, it all comes back to relevance with the day and age. I try to lead people with a message because a lot of people aren't going to come to my show to dance. You know, like you said, we write for the intellectuals. So this is something that you can come to the show and catch a drink and really listen to the words. You know, really listen to the words and appreciate the craft.
Definitely. You know, I'll say this though, and I have to add this in. I couldn't do this without adding this in though. Just asking about this particular song because you know, with your music it's hard to pick a favorite, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no doubt.
Sometimes they play individually. Sometimes they play individually in my head. Like there's certain things that stay in my head, but a lot of times it plays like one long chapter. You know what I mean? And but one song I gotta say is probably my favorite song on the Shamanic album is probably Steel Drums. You know, and even in the review I quoted that one heavily. You know, tell me a little bit about making that song. You know.
Man, Steel Drums, yeah, that's one of my personal favorites too. I'm glad you did that. The song came across pretty organically, I guess you could say. The brother that sent me the beat, Gaming Dash, who is a producer from California. Again, you know, does the internet working wonders with me and being able to build that bridge with him. I've known him for some years. showed me that beat one day, and the drums are something that always captures me as an MC. If there's hard hitting drums, it's really going to bring out the best in me. The drums have that certain crackle and that bang to it, you know what I'm saying? It really makes me want to capture the environment or whatever I'm expressing as vivid as possible. So with steel drums, that was more of like a statement, because it really wasn't as introspective as, I guess you could say, some of my other works. It is to an extent, but I also wanted it to be a demonstration of skill more so than something else I would sit down and do. Again, and then with the harmonization at the end of it, that's kind of an ode to my inspirations as well. I just tried to tie in that era that isn't heard anymore. I was born in '90. I didn't grow up in the '90s, certainly, but I do remember Capital Punishment coming out. You know what I'm saying? I do remember all the Pac's albums. I remember Michael Jordan playing. You know what I'm saying? These are things that I've seen as a child that inspired me to this day. So that's what I tried to capture with that video. That song. Speaking of videos, the reason I kind of got mixed up there, there was a brother named, what's his name? Zaid Gaines. And he passed away, actually. We were supposed to shoot the video to that song, Steel Drums. That was a pretty crazy coincidence, you asked me about that.
Right.
I still definitely intend to do that video, though. Rest in power to that brother. He's a good man. We never really got the chance to build the physical or anything, but he was a good dude and offered to shoot the video just off the strength of hearing that song. So it definitely a standout for me as well on that album. I'm glad to dig it already.
That's definitely peace, man. That's definitely peace. I'll say this though, but out of all the albums, I think that the last full album that I reviewed, Shamanic, I think that's your most developed album and stuff. But looking back on it, what would you say that you try to do different with that album? As far as elevating and stuff, because I definitely, I definitely hear you. The hooks, the vocal hooks and stuff that you put in the choruses, they're much more melodic. There's much more, your rhythmic writing is increasing. You know what I mean? And you have to kind of listen closely to hear that, Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's always something that I've kind of aspired to do as well, and it's something that I've, in my way earlier works that were never released, I've hooks where they were complete harmonization, and I mean, you're gonna hear that again some more coming up. It's just something that I try to capture when the energy is there and appropriate. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to be one of those cats that singing every chorus or become something, because then I think it becomes it drifts into that zone of mainstream in a sense, to where you're trying to appeal to the pop standards. If there's soul in it, then there's always going to be soul, and you're always going to be able to feel the soul in it. But there's a lot of artists my age that just try to do these catchy hooks and have no substance, And I think by me not doing those melodic choruses or adding a lot of melodic rhythmic ideas into my rhymes as far as reminding them, I just wanted to stray as far away from that as possible. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely see that, man.
And just give an appreciation to lyricism. But yeah, I'm still definitely a young cat in terms of progressing as an artist. I have a lot to learn. I've been blessed with a couple big opportunities. Even just being able to build like this, I appreciate deeply. So, there's going to be a lot more evolution that you hear from myself and my cat.
That's definitely peace, yeah. Definitely peace. Extended EP, the Extended Waves EP, that was only 4 songs though. Were these B-sides from the Shamanic?
Yeah, originally Shamanic was going to be like 24 tracks, something like that, like a whole compilation of tracks. I didn't really consider it to be an album, which is funny because a lot of people are telling me that it has the consistency of an album. They consider it to be an album, which is dope to me. I think that's dope. The Extended Waves EP, those tracks were, I feel like I had a little bit more left to say as far as that concept. Spiritualism was obviously a big concept on Shamanic, and that's something I wanted to express still in those 4 tracks. So, and it was my way of thanking fans because there was a decent turnout, And when I say that, I definitely don't want her to be confused. I'm not pushing thousands of units or anything, but just being able to buy my seeds some dinner once in a while that's outside of the slave corporation of America is peace, Being able to let my art be transmitted into food for my children is dope, So, yeah, man. Yeah, no doubt.
Definitely. No, I definitely see that. Now, as far as this, you said you were releasing something on Tuesday. Is that the As Above thing that I've seen?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That's it's gonna be another short EP of tracks that I've done on Ichiban Hashtag's production. That I've been collecting over the past couple months. In a way to kind of be a prelude to the album that we're working on. It's called The Art of War. That'll be, the majority of that will be his production, and production, and this is kind of a reintroduction to our sound because we've always done shows here on a local circuit. That's been the majority of how we've gotten our music out as youth. But we never really put a lot of projects out together as a group. We went through a lot of evolutions with group names and sounds and entities as far as MCs. And I think now with Swords for Hire, we're at a point that we can fully express ourselves. Swords for Hire more or less is food for thought. In so many words, we are giving you this substance, in hopes that we're able to sustain ourselves. So that's what we're trying to bring. We approach life as a battle. We study different strategies in life and how to master the difficulties we encounter. So that's what we try to capture with our music.
That's definitely peace, man.
It's definitely where it's at right now.
Well, I'll say this though, in covering all this, I'm, like I said before, I'm endlessly impressed. You know what I mean? Endlessly impressed. The skills is definitely there. You know what I mean?